Hey everybody, it's Eden. Welcome back to my channel and thank you so much for being here. I actually cannot wait to see what you think about today's video. So today's video is all about goals, but more specifically, what are we doing wrong when we set our goals that make them harder to achieve? And ways to change that, of course. For me, it's the time of Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. For you, it might be that you're just about to start a new academic year, or that you set some goals and resolutions last January that now seem so far away that you don't even care about them anymore, and you're just waiting for next January to arrive so you can start all over again. In Hebrew, we actually have a word for it, and we call it asak, which is the abbreviation of Avirat Sof Kurs. And the literal meaning is that feeling at the end of term when you just want to break loose after working so hard and you can see the end, so you ease your grip. So if you ask yourself, what makes setting goals and sticking to them so difficult? Why is it that every time that we tell ourselves, this is the year, this time it will be different, when in fact we're back to our old ways within a week and we just teach ourselves how good we are at failing? So if that sounds familiar to you, then this video is for you. I'm going to talk about why following our goals can be so difficult, and I'm going to give you some research-based tips on how to come out on the other side with the upper hand. I'm also going to share with you exactly what I do that keeps me from failing on what I set for myself, and it works for me every single time and actually has completely changed my life. So let's get started. You know me by now, I like starting with a quote, and here too you've probably heard that quote many times, and it goes like this: insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Now, of course, I have to give you a fun fact about its origin as well. So, according to Quote Investigator, there is no evidence that supports that these are actually Albert Einstein's words. And the earliest significant reference to this quote was found in a 1981 newspaper article in Tennessee. And this article discusses a gathering of Al-Anon, which is an organization aimed at assisting families of individuals struggling with alcoholism. And the journalist outlined the 12 steps of Al-Anon, and these steps are based on a framework similar to that used in Alcoholics Anonymous. So the newspaper began by presenting the first two steps as follows. Step 1, we acknowledged that we had no control over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2, we started to believe that a higher power could help restore our sanity. Not everyone was willing to admit that they needed to be quote-unquote restored to sanity, and one of them firmly stated that they had never reached a point of insanity. However, another person remarked, insanity is repeatedly doing the same thing and expecting different results. And there you have it. Back to the quote. The meaning of this quote stays the same regardless of who said it first. And it is that in regards to our goals, specifically the ones we can't seem to follow, it's because we're not aware of what we do and we don't admit to ourselves that we're doing just the same and expecting different outcomes. This is why the first step is to raise our self-awareness. Now, if you want to link it back to where that quote came from, it's no wonder that in AA meetings, for example, the first step is actually to first acknowledge that there is a problem. So think about it. The only reason you're not following the goals you set for yourself is because you're not aware. For example, let's say that your goal is to work out every day early in the morning before you leave for work, and you want to do this for a month to establish a healthy habit. So you work out the first day, the second day goes fine too, and so on. And then let's say on the 5th day, you wake up early after a not so good night's sleep, and you start saying to yourself things like, today it's fine not to work out, I didn't sleep well, I don't want to injure myself. Besides, 6 workouts out of 7 is very good for the first week, etc. So we begin to rationalize our excuses, and that is because having a goal intention is not enough. Professor Peter Goldwitzer, who is a professor of psychology at NYU, looked into the effectiveness of intention when setting goals. And he found that having the intention alone to start a certain goal is not merely enough and can hardly predict a goal completion. In his words, goal intentions emerged as much poorer predictors of future action when antagonistic behaviors had been performed frequently and consistently in relevant contexts. So having the intention to complete a goal is not sufficient, and this is especially true when we do things that go against our goals regularly in situations that matter. Our plans to achieve those goals become less reliable at telling us what we'll actually end up doing. So we might say that we want to achieve something, but our actions don't match what we say. So in the workout goal example, what happens to us when we decide not to work out and follow our goal? The awareness of our goal to work out and to have a healthier lifestyle went to the back of our minds, and therefore there was nothing to stop us from making the same decision that we did the last time we tried this goal. And now again, nothing is stopping us from giving in to this temptation. Instead, we need to bring the awareness of our goals to the front, to our conscious minds, and actively think about it and choose differently. Of course, it's incredibly hard. It's not fun, but that's the only way to make things change. So let's look at what self-awareness actually is and why it's so important. The short and basic definition is self-awareness is at its core the ability to see ourselves clearly, to understand who we are, how others see us, and how we fit into the world. So now let's unpack this and back it up a little bit.
And it is there in ancient Greece that our story begins.
Socrates, the great philosopher, viewed knowledge as a virtue and argued that knowledge is the foundation that enables us to be conscious of our actions and their consequences. Since Socrates is considered to be a wise thinker, his statement, "All I know is that I know nothing," perplexed many scholars who spend a lot of time analyzing it. And this statement emphasizes that the path to wisdom is a continuous and endless journey, and that the more we learn, the more we realize the vastness of what we don't actually know. I love this statement, and I want to believe that I'm applying the idea of it on a daily basis. At least that's what I'm striving for. I think we can always learn more, we can always improve, we can learn from every situation or from every encounter that we have, and that learning and improving ourselves is a never-ending journey. Mitchell Green, a philosophy professor, talks about Socrates' statement in his book, Know Thyself, The Value and Limits of Self-Knowledge. In an interview conducted by Kenneth Best, Green says, "One big barrier to achieving anything in the direction of self-knowledge is hubris, thinking that we do know, often confusing our confidence in our opinions with thinking that confidence is an indication of my degree of correctness." To strengthen Green's idea that we think we know, I want to refer you to the actual percentage presented by Dr. Tasha Eurich in her book Insight. Her research concluded that 95% of the participants had the confidence that they were self-aware, while only 10 to 15% of them were truly self-aware. In other words, many of us think we know ourselves, we know what we do, we know what's important. And the way I see it, this confidence, for a lack of a better word, can be dangerous in the sense that if I'm that good, why should I change? In order to learn and grow, I first need to realize and be aware that I need to learn and grow and that I need to change. And that can only happen when I see myself clearly after a deep reflection. The importance of self-awareness is now linked to all critical qualities required for better mental health, success, and leadership. An article published in Harvard Business Review shows that strong self-awareness is the single biggest predictor of career success because it leads to better decision-making, better coordination, better conflict management, and better overall performance. No wonder it's called the meta skill of the 21st century. And that is what we need to have in order to start making the right decisions for ourselves, to change our habits, and to achieve the goals that we set for ourselves. We need to be brave to dig deeper and learn more about who we are and what parts of ourselves we wish to work on. Maybe we can even ask others, like friends and family, and invite them to have an open discussion and share their thoughts about what they think is good about you and what kind of changes they think you'll benefit from. And this can give you an insight about what others might be thinking about you, but also can give you an insight about what you might need to work on in case you didn't come up with it yourself. And then when we have our goals and we know what we need to do to make a change, we just need to bring that awareness to the front, and then it will be much easier to choose differently even in challenging situations. And here are some tools that might help you do that. The first method to raise our self-awareness is visualization. What I mean by visualization is a number of things. The basis of this is what some of you might call manifestation, and some of you might translate it to vision or mood boards. And it's all part of visualization. But what some people forget or avoid adding to their visualization exercise is the visualization of the hardships that arise when we're following our goals. We visualize the results, but not the process. Let's say our goal is to lose a certain amount of weight. So we visualize how amazing we'd feel, the boost of confidence and energy. But we don't visualize the hard days when we didn't sleep well at night and we had the worst day at work and we were stuck in traffic for the past 2 hours, and all we want at this exact moment is some comfort, junk food, and loads of snacks while we're binging on Netflix because we deserve it. So we want to follow our goal, but we are not willing to pay the price. So part of visualization or manifestation has to include the hard moments, which will make us more self-aware about our actions and decisions, and will be able to prepare for challenging moments. This way, we're kind of training our brain to face the challenges with courage and to feel comfortable in uncomfortable situations. So how do we do that? Achieving success is difficult, so we need to make failing harder. So we need to add obstacles for ourselves that will make it harder for us to fall into the bad habits that we're trying to change. So after we visualize the hardships that might occur, after we perform a deep analysis of ourselves and our behaviors, we should visualize and think about what will make it harder for us to fail. For example, Google offices wanted to establish a healthier lifestyle for their employees. So they conducted an experiment and collected the data, of course. In the experiment, instead of having open bowls of M&Ms in the office, which makes it very easy and convenient to just grab and eat them, put them in opaque containers. The results in the New York office alone were that in a period of 7 weeks, a staff of 2,000 employees consumed less than 3.1 million calories from M&Ms. And that's a decrease of 9 vending machine-sized packages of M&Ms for each of the office's 2,000 employees. This wasn't their only experiment. When Google wanted their employees to drink more water as opposed to sugary drinks, they placed water bottles on eye-level shelves behind a clear glass and placed the sugary drinks at the bottom behind a frosty glass, which resulted in an increase of 47% in water consumption, and the intake of soda drinks fell by 7%. These experiments show that when we have even the tiniest obstacle on the things that usually tempt us to fail and give ourselves the opportunity to pause just for a second, there's less chance that we'll fail. Now, at the same time, if we make good habits more convenient and easy for us to follow, there's a better chance that we'll stick to them. But that's part of being brutally honest with ourselves, knowing our triggers, admitting that we need to add obstacles, and making the option to fail harder and the option to succeed easier. I have to show you something. I wanted to start recording and I heard something is breathing, so yeah, it's right under the table. If-then planning is a form of habit stacking, meaning creating a new habit by associating it with a current habit. This is also called implementation intentions, and James Clear briefly discusses it in his book, Atomic Habits. Professor Goldwitzer, whom I've mentioned earlier, said that having a goal intention is ineffective and can hardly predict a goal completion. And one of the reasons that having the intention is not enough is because it's not part of our daily routines. Goldwitzer's empirical research shows that 70% of the participants failed in their task, although the intention was there. So he came up with the term implementation intentions, which he defines as follows. Implementation intentions are if-then plans that connect good opportunities to act with cognitive or behavioral responses that are effective in accomplishing one's goal. A goal intention refers to what one intends to achieve, whereas an implementation intention specifies when, where, and how one intends to achieve it. So basically, if your goal, for example, is to read more, so instead of saying this week I want to finish reading X, you need to say if tomorrow I have my lunch, I will then read 3 pages of X while doing so. This means that you'll remember what you intend to do, and you'll have an internal cue or an external cue that will remind you what you should do next. It's all about creating a clear mental link between a particular situation and a specific response or behavior. So let's look at more examples. If your goal is to reduce procrastination, a regular goal would look like this. I want to stop procrastinating. When you use implementation intention, it looks like this. If I sit down to work on my project, then I'll set a timer for 25 minutes and focus completely on my task. If your goal is to reduce stress, your regular goal would look like this. I want to reduce stress. When you use implementation intention, it would look like something like this. If I feel stressed at work, then I'll take 5 deep breaths and remind myself that this moment will pass. Now, you can use the if-then planning to relate to good opportunities to act or to anticipate obstacles. You can use it to anticipate and address scenarios that might lead you to failure or that might make it difficult for you to achieve your goals. So as I mentioned earlier, we need to find ways to make failing harder. So we can do that by adding obstacles, but we can also use the if-then planning to add obstacles or to find solutions. Let's consider an example for both. If our goal is to drink less alcohol, so to add an obstacle, we'll need to remove all the alcohol from our house and make sure that our fridge or bar is always equipped with water or other healthier juices instead, so it's more convenient to follow our goal than to go astray. Then, if we want to have a drink, the obstacle would be that we would need to go and buy it, which can help us pause for a second and question the motive of our action and bring our awareness of our goal to our conscious minds. To apply the if-then planning, we'd plan it as follows. If I'm invited to a housewarming party where alcohol is served, I will then bring non-alcoholic drinks with me. And that's how we set a proactive strategy to prevent relapse in a challenging situation. If-then planning is an incredibly useful strategy, and the abundance of research has found that it increases everyone's chances of succeeding in achieving their goals. So whether you're an athlete, at school, in business, or when you set some personal goals, this strategy can help you not only initiate the process and work towards your goals, but also make you stronger and more resilient when obstacles arise. Another visualization tool is visualizing the future, particularly visualizing the worst case scenarios. Our anxieties are about events that didn't happen, but we think might happen in the future. And when we are scared to act, we procrastinate. I remember when working on my master's thesis, I hypothesized that adults are afraid of children and the way it is manifested in children's literature. So I learned a lot about fear, what it means, and where it comes from. I learned that many have theorized that the fear of the unknown is the most fundamental fear that we can experience as human beings. And when we think about the future, it's no wonder that we're anxious about it because it's unknown to us and we have no control over it. In our minds, whatever is unknown to us is necessarily a threat that brings about this anxiety. However, visualizing the future, especially visualizing the worst case scenarios and overcoming the challenges in these scenarios, will make the unknown known and familiar and therefore not as scary, so we'll be more prompt to act. Now, I'm not saying that we should always imagine the worst, but in times when you find yourself procrastinate, for example, then ask yourself what stresses you out? What prevents you from taking action? What is the worst case scenario in taking action? imagine yourself in that situation and then imagine yourself overcoming that challenge. This technique is also called negative visualization, and it's based on a Stoic approach that imagining yourself in a situation when things go wrong and dealing with it will make you realize that the monster is not as humongous as you imagine, and that you actually have the ability to overcome this challenge and prepare for it. In CBT therapy, for example, they call it worry exposure, and it has been found to be more effective in dealing with generalized anxiety behavior, and claims that it makes people understand that they are much stronger than they actually realize. In relation to the fear of the unknown, in CBT there's also uncertainty exposure, which was very interesting for me to learn about, so I'm including it here. And it's basically to expose yourself to small situations where the events are uncertain and unpredictable, such as hanging out with a different group of people, ordering a dish you've never eaten before, etc. And this is yet another way to practice feeling comfortable in uncomfortable situations and to make the unknown known. A psychologist researcher, Gary Klein, published an article in Harvard Business Review where he talks about the same idea, and he calls it pre-mortem. He talks about how it can be beneficial for businesses and says that, as in postmortem, which is a procedure that happens in a medical setting where an examination of a dead body is carried out to determine the cause of death, Klein offers businesses to do a pre-mortem, and basically, after briefing the team about a certain project, to shut down the presentation and tell the team that the project has failed, and ask each of the team members to analyze all the possible reasons as to why this project has failed, which will result in the success of a project and avoidance of a postmortem. So I want to share a personal story with you about how this negative visualization worked for me. So I'm super scared of public speaking. And during my undergrad in education, I was expected, and rightfully so, to teach countless of lessons while I'm being observed by a panel of professors, to present loads of presentations in class, and also to present a research in a student conference held by my college. To top it all up, everything had to be in English, which is obviously not my native language. Needless to say that I was what felt like the most stressed person on earth. I really felt as if I'd transformed into a shapeless being that was pure pressure and nothing more. It was so far out of my comfort zone that before every lesson or presentation, I had more panic attacks than I could count. And I decided to avoid presenting at that conference at all costs. One time, after a presentation I had in class, my professor came to me and she asked me if I'm open to seeing one of the therapists in college, because they specialize in things like that, and she saw, my struggle. Of course, I was open to anything at that point, and I started seeing one of the therapists that worked there. And for a few good months, all we did was visualizing me presenting a research at that conference. Now, let me tell you, it was way more difficult than it sounds. So every session, my therapist asked me to close my eyes and to really take myself to that moment when I'm entering the hall, and to really talk her through about what am I wearing, what do I see first, who am I talking to, what sensations I feel in my body, and so on. And at the beginning, all I could do was to visualize myself entering the hall, and that was it. I would break down. I couldn't visualize anything anymore. Slowly and surely, I was able to visualize more and more, until I was able to visualize the whole event. And every time I reached a point where I'd say something like, I don't want to do this because if I'll do it and this will happen, then I don't know what I'll do. And she'll insist to stay in that moment, and she'll say like, okay, let's think about it for a second. Let's imagine that this is what is happening right now. And then what? What are you going to do? Why is it that important? And we'll break down every challenge, basically. So I basically visualized all the things that could go wrong and how I overcome them. Eventually what happened was that instead of being paralyzed just by the thought of participating in that conference, I became excited about it. And I remember a time, it's a bit embarrassing to share that part, but I hope you won't hold it against me. I remember a time that whenever I went to bed trying to fall asleep, I'd think about it and I'd be excited about it. Just like when you have an event that you're excited about, or a vacation that is coming up and you think about it before you fall asleep. That's what I did, and it was the exact same feeling, and it amazed me that I wanted it to happen. I wanted to be there on stage. And you can guess the rest. I ended up presenting a research at that conference, and I was stressed, okay? But in a way that felt manageable, normal, not paralyzing, and way more exhilarating. I remember joking with my friends before the lecture. I even posted something on Facebook back then when Facebook was popular. Things that I wasn't able to do before I had, presentations. I was busy panicking. So yeah, I remember this as such an amazing experience. It's not only the adrenaline that you get from the audience and from presenting something that you worked really hard on, but also I felt like I won something way bigger within myself. If I do this and I come out alive, there's nothing that I can't do. So Dr. Susie, thank you so much. I owe you big time. And to all of you that are still here after my long story, I hope you can see now how negative visualization can be helpful in some situations. Now, another part of visualization is to visualize the person you want to become using the Be, Do, Have module. Many of the personal development gurus such as Stephen Covey and Tony Robbins talk about this module. In a nutshell, it means that if you want to have something, you first need to do and take actions. And in order to do that, you first need to be that person or to become that person. So for example, if my goal is to publish a book, and this means to have a book ready to be published, I first need to become a writer. And what do writers do? They write. And this means that if I planned to have a long writing session on a Friday evening and then some friends invited me over for some drinks, I should ask myself, what would a writer do? Because writers and authors, they write all the time, especially when they set a specific time for writing. So when you ask yourself that question, you bring the awareness of your goal to the front, and it's easier to make better decisions. Now, I'm not sure where I heard it before, so if you know, you can let me know and we'll give that person a credit. But basically what I mean, in other words, that we need to change the noun into a verb. And instead of emptily saying, I'm a writer or I want to be a writer, ask yourself, am I writing? Am I going out of my comfort zone and doing what it takes to achieve that goal of mine? I saw a breakdown that the author Jermaine Fraser did on his website, where he said there are 3 approaches to live our lives: the victim, the worker, the winner. The victim uses this model as have, do, and be. And people that are in this category believe that they need to have things like time, money, and support before they can actually do what they want and then be happy or successful. They're always waiting for external conditions to change. The worker uses this model as do, have, and be. And people that are in this category think that by constantly doing more and getting more stuff, they'll eventually be happy. But they often end up busy and tired, and happiness never comes. The winner uses this model as be, do, have, and that's the ideal way of using this model. And people that are in this category, they focus on who they need to be to achieve their goals. They ask themselves what kind of person would achieve these outcomes. Then they figure out what actions to take based on that identity, and success naturally follows. Personally, I visualize an updated version of myself as who I want to become, and I call it Eden 2.0. So whenever I want to do something that is the opposite of what my updated version wants, I stop and visualize my present self having a discussion with my updated version. I know it sounds funny, but the changes I wanted to see for a while finally happened thanks to that. My updated version puts me first. So whenever I feel the need to self-sabotage, to procrastinate, to feel stressed or other negative emotions, I ask myself, who's driving the car right now? Is it my present self or my updated self? My present self wants to eat lots of sweets right now, and she doesn't care that afterwards she'll have a stomach ache, she'll feel sorry for herself and disappointed with herself. But right now she wants to throw some kind of tantrum because she had a long day and something annoyed her. So my 2.0 version tells my present self, that's fine, you can eat all these sweets, but don't wonder afterwards why you're not me. And once I bring that awareness to the front, my present self has no chance. Another way to raise your self-awareness is by taking responsibility. To be self-aware means to have control, but in order to have control, you have to take responsibility. In every single situation, you can take responsibility. Even when the things that are happening in your life are beyond your control, you can still take responsibility for the way you feel or react to these things or situations. Now, I'm not sure who taught me that, but it's something that I've known for as long as I can remember. And it's that when you point at someone in an accusation, remember that 3 fingers are pointed back at you. So when you found yourself blaming others for your behavior, don't forget to question your contribution to the situation, because even if the blame is just, you can still behave according to your values and no one can take that away from you. You have the control to take everything in a certain way. And I believe we can always reflect and see that even in unfair or unjust situations, we can always decide to learn, to grow, and to be better. I also saw this, and I'm not sure where, that responsibility is the ability to respond. Simple as that. And we always have the freedom to choose the way we respond to things. To take responsibility, we can use Dr. Urich's technique from her book Insight and not ask why. She says that self-aware people never ask why, and that is because, and I quote, when we ask why, that is, examine the causes of our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, we are generally searching for the easiest and more plausible answer. Sadly though, once we've found one, we generally stop looking, despite having no way of knowing whether our answer is right or wrong. Uric gives the example of one of the participants in her research, a 42-year-old mother who quit her career as a lawyer when she realized that this career was not for her. And she said, if you ask why, you're putting yourself into a victim mentality. When I feel anything other than peace, I say, what's going on? What am I feeling? What is this dialogue inside my head? What's another way to see this situation? What can I do to respond better? Etc. So, in the words of the king of pop, I'm starting with the man in the mirror because that's the only way to make a change. On the topic of changing the questions we ask ourselves, I want to give you more questions that will help raising your self-awareness. In solution-focused therapy, for example, which generally means a short-term and goal-focused therapy that usually starts from the end backwards, in that kind of therapy, clients are encouraged to answer and reflect on what they call the miracle question, which is something along the lines of, if one night after you fell asleep, there was a miracle that took all of your problems away, and because you were sleeping, you didn't know. So what would you feel in the morning? What will tell you that your problems are gone? What your life would look like? And how people will know that that miracle happened for you without you telling them? Now you can edit it the way you want, but the goal is to think about what will happen if we accomplished everything we've ever dreamed of. We have no problems or issues that are preventing us from following our goals. And then to do a sort of reverse engineering to understand what our goals actually are, what we actually want, and what matter to us. Another question that we can ask ourselves is a question that Tim Ferriss presented in a TED Talk a few years ago, where he said that instead of setting goals, he's setting fears. And he asks himself, what is he most afraid of? What will happen if I have that uncomfortable conversation? What will happen if I relocate to a different country? And maybe the most important of all is, what will happen if I don't act now? Now, these questions can raise your awareness as to what exactly you want to accomplish, what your goals are, how badly you want them, and how you need to start now. Now, if you've thought about these questions and you're still not sure about what your goals are, or you think that your goals may be not too specific, then instead of what you want in life and where you see yourself in the next 5 years, try to ask yourself what you don't want in life and where you don't want to see yourself in the following years, which will then hopefully will direct you to your desired answer. So we reached the end of the video, and I hope it has inspired you to take action towards your goals by raising your self-awareness and by making more intentional choices. And maybe you can start today by deciding that you're going to do one thing differently today. I want to tell you that everything I shared with you today is intended for personal development, and it's information that I purposefully looked for in order to understand myself better, understand what is happening, and how can I be better at setting goals for myself. And I hope it was useful for you as well. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences. You can email me, DM me, or share a comment below, whichever way you'd like. I'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to let you go now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!